Good afternoon, everyone. I'll start the introductions here in a few minutes. We're going to give everyone about a minute from now to continue logging in, and then we'll be joining you shortly. All right, well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on whatever time zone you're logging in from. My name is Gary Rolfson. I'm on the education team here at STEP CG. I'm joined on the line by Jim Kerr from KB and Associates, who I'm going to introduce you to in just a moment. But let me start by introducing you to the larger team. Actually, much larger than this, quite honestly. We've grown considerably since this picture was taken. But this is our team here at STEP CG. I'm introducing you to them for one specific reason. The recent coronavirus epidemic has created quite a challenge, not just in education, but not just in the nation, but it's a global challenge. It's one that we're in with you, not just as a partner, as a resource, as someone who can either bring solutions, but also resources like Jim. But we're in it because we're living through this challenge as well. I speak personally as a father of four with a senior who didn't get to walk across that stage, never got to go to prom, and might not even attend her fall semester of college. We're living through this. We're understanding the challenges that are being brought by extending the classroom to parking lots, to the backs of, station wagons and into the home. And we have some thoughts of what's going to change, but we're here. We're here as a sounding board. We're here to offer solutions, and we're here really just to help figure this out, because we don't think that the ultimate solution to these challenges have been written yet, but we're going to keep our ear to the ground and bring those to you as we discover them. As far as questions go for this conversation, we have enabled the chat, and we will address those questions individually. At the end of this presentation, we're going to try to keep it to about 45 minutes and then leave about 10 to 15 minutes for that Q&A session. So let me go ahead and get started. What separates, STEP from really any partnership you could potentially make? Quite honestly, it's that last slide. The special ingredient in this recipe, like so many things, is our people. We've brought together some of the best engineering talent, best education talent, and best partnerships in terms of vendor and manufacturers, and brought those to customers like yourselves, really with a desire to just listen about the ways that education has been brought to the table previously, but more importantly, the way it's going to continue to change. And so that's really our most important quality, is to pair the right resources with the right knowledge base, with the right opportunity. And so we encourage you, any questions, any thoughts, any concerns, bring them to us today, tomorrow, this summer, or as we go into the next school season. Again, what sets us apart is education, particularly K-12, is in our DNA. Right, our talent comes from working and living in those individual districts, from the manufacturers who now work, personnel that works for us today that develop solutions just for education. And one thing that we're learning, and I'm sure you all are as well, is there's a percentage of learning that is never going to return to the classroom. And we've known this for a while. It's this crisis that has brought it to the forefront and caught the attention of some of the folks who provide some of the funding vehicles to make it a reality. But what we're here to do is to develop the right size solutions so that all of those best practices and great ideas that came from educators in the classroom, that we can still deliver those wherever that learning might happen in the future. We understand that technology is a tool, is a resource, and it is the bridge between knowledge and learning. And the unfortunate reality of what's happened with COVID-19, as I'm sure a lot of you all are seeing, is that there is a digital divide in this country. There's an inequality in opportunity for learning for those students who don't have connectivity, who don't have the right tools, who don't have the ability. That student's never going to get Wednesday at 12 p.m. back again. And so those folks who can't connect, who can't learn, they're at a real disadvantage. And our hopes, and I'm sure your hopes as well, and Jim will address this, is that in some capacity, the funding is going to catch up to that need and is going to bridge that digital divide. And when it does, we'll be here with flexible ideas around that, either capital purchases or managed services where you pay as you go, whatever fits those individual districts. Because one thing we've learned is that it's not that no two districts are alike, it's that not even no two schools are alike, no two classrooms are alike, no two educators are alike, and more importantly, no two students are alike. So making sure that those right size, right fit approaches, can become a reality, both from a technological perspective as well as a funding perspective. Hopefully those will marry up real soon. We like to think they will. And when they do, again, we'll be here to help. One of the last things I want to touch on, we hope everyone on this call will have an opportunity to participate, but our innovation lab that we are opening later this month. This again is a resource, a collaborative resource where technology, customer partners like yourself, manufacturing partners, and our resources can all come together and really explore and push at the boundaries of what's possible today and what might be a reality tomorrow. So we'll be making some announcements on that. As I said, probably later this month. This COVID challenge has really thrown a lot of things up in the air, but we are ready to open when appropriate, and we will be extending those invites out to everyone so that they might become a part of it. So with that, let me introduce Jim Kerr. Jim Kerr is the principal at KB & Associates. He's got a wealth of experience and intelligence, not only in the K-12 sector, but also within the ERate program. And what he's here to do, I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, is not only provide you some of the updates that have recently occurred through ERate, but some of the anticipated changes that are coming. And then if he can, read those tea leaves, some of the things that might be on the horizon in terms of what some of the additional funding vehicles might look like in the future. So with that, I'm going to hand the reins over to Jim. Jim, welcome, and thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Gary. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm on the West Coast, so it's still good morning for me. Thanks for your time. I always preface these conversations with a couple of things. One is that I am a ERate consultant to service providers and manufacturers. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, kind of with a wink, but I'm acting in the best interest of the service providers and the manufacturers in these discussions. So one of the first things they teach you in ERate training is know your role. So I am a consultant to those folks. I can't help you with your Form 470s. I can convey rules of the road and those kinds of things and trends and that kind of information, but I can't help you with your application process unless you've already selected a specific service provider or manufacturer, in which case after the Form 471 filing is going down, I can do so. So that's the introduction of myself. I'm also experiencing the coronavirus. I'm a home office guy to begin with, but my wife actually works as essential personnel for a school district. So she's actually working more hours, I think, than she's ever worked before to get through this process and help her management and leadership team get through this process here in Southern California. So it's interesting. I think it's interesting what's going to transpire in coming days and months, and I don't think we all know what the full ramifications are of this. But I appreciate STEP CG in that their intent here is to be a sounding board, learn with you, help you grow, help you expand, and help you accomplish your goals and missions as you proceed. And they're not doing it in a hard sell kind of environment. They are truly people-oriented and process-oriented and here to help. So with that, on to the first slide of this process. We're here to talk about maybe helping you gain revenue recognition or gain revenue through the ERate process, as far as making sure that you have a smooth funding commitment decision letter, or gain a smooth process to getting a funding commitment decision letter. And then we're going to talk about the CARES Act with the latest education stabilization funding, as well as what just came out yesterday and what they're now calling the HEROES Act. Next slide, please. So we're just going to talk about some of the latest updates. The very first one is that the gift rule for ERate was suspended. So you are allowed to approach your partners, your service providers and the manufacturers and ask them for help in the form of gifts. And up until September 30th, they can give you equipment, support, a variety of things to help you in accomplishing your expansion of broadband and distance learning. And again, it must be for improved broadband connections or equipment for telehealth or remote learning. But again, they can do that. So if they want to give you a license to better manage your network, if they wanted to help you with VPNs or a variety of other solutions, again, they're eligible to do so up until September 30th as a one-time donation. Next. So there were some extensions to deadlines and process extensions. So you get a 30 days for an extension for response to PIA process. So if you get a 15-day letter, you have an additional 30 days to respond to that. A number of different other invoice deadlines and stuff have also been extended due to the coronavirus situation. There's also a public use or community use rule that used to say that ERate products and services were not eligible to be used in the community, and that's no longer the case. So if you have an internet connection and you provide Wi-Fi access, let's say in the parking lot, and allow community members to go into the parking lot and gain guest access to your internet for whatever reason, that is now no longer a violation of ERate rules. The same with public libraries and those sorts of situations. So again, community use is acceptable for ERate funded devices and services. Next. The CARES Act, the Stimulus 2.0, if you will, has the distribution for that has already started. So the funding was available a couple of weeks ago for distribution, and that is it's amazing. It seems like it was just yesterday that this was passing, but it's already been 30 days, and that money is flowing to schools and libraries. It is state dependent upon how you gain access to that funds, but there was $17 billion for K-12 education in that bill, and the money is being disseminated now. So make sure you're in line for that. It's very state by state is the amount of money that's actually available and how you go to get it from your local or from your state government, but it is available and the money is there right now. Next. So yesterday, the House announced their next stimulation package or stimulus package. It's being called the HEROES Act. There's discussion outside of that for an additional couple of $2 billion for ERate. Democratic senators are pushing for an expansion to the National Broadband Plan and an expansion of ERate. We thought it might be in this package. It does not appear to be. I was up reading late last night, the 1,800 pages looking for education. Within that, it does not appear to be an expansion of ERate or a definition of ERate. So there's a couple of things we're suggesting that are going to become really important as you move forward. One is petition the FCC, and you're going to see this summer for sure some sort of invite to participate in the petitioning or comment process for ERate. A variety of organizations, what's called the State ERate Coordinators Association or SECA, the NHLSB, which is the National Healthcare and Libraries, Schools, Broadband Coalition, is also petitioning. A variety of consultants are pushing for several things to become ERate eligible or allowed under ERate. One is allow mobility for school buses to be designated as mobile classrooms and to establish distance learning sites. Bookmobiles for libraries are currently eligible, and we're saying why shouldn't school buses be eligible? The amount of time that kids spend on school buses, the ability to place a school bus out in the community and utilize as a mobile hotspot should certainly be eligible. Allow MiFi devices, and these are not just your hockey pucks, the unmanaged devices, but more distance learning applications to eliminate the digital divide should be eligible, and allow a complete next generation firewall solution to be 100% eligible. The only thing that wouldn't be eligible with that is content filtering. Everything else would be eligible, and you can support these today by going to that link, the fcc.gov, for filings. And the proceeding is 13-184, and you can see anytime you want to input a brief comment or statement to that effect, to those three things, you're certainly welcome to do so. Anybody's allowed to make a comment. You just have to put your email address in and your name, and then it's a pretty straightforward process to do so. Next slide. So how is coronavirus impacting education? And I'm not going to take a deep dive into any one of these things, but they all have significant impact on bandwidth and on your network capabilities. And it's going to really become important this coming fall when we start to open up classrooms. So certainly distance learning is here to stay. It was already there in a variety of forms, but now it becomes really important. Bandwidth increases with VPN and security for remote users. This is going to become really interesting come the fall when you have a staggered class. Let's say that half the class with distance learning or social distancing requirements in the classroom, in a traditional classroom, maybe you can get 12 students in the classroom. Well, you've got a 24, 25 student class. You can't have them all in the classroom at one time. So how are you going to stagger it so that you have half the class in the classroom and half the class doing distance learning, staggered days? There's all kinds of things being tossed around about this. But that means that if you're going to have a full class and half of them are present, the other half are going to be streaming. And that's going to put some real strains on bandwidth. And managing that. And security is going to become a big issue. Flipped classes, we all have been dealing with that. I think that's going to become a more interesting situation as well, but not, again, having impact on what real-time bandwidth capabilities are. And then again, digital equity, making sure that students that are underserved have the capabilities to access the resources. Next slide. So what's trending? Given recent announcements by states regarding budget deficits, ERate is going to become even more significant as a funding arsenal, or funding package in your arsenal. If you haven't utilized it before, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's a great way to fund stuff that you're already buying. So with budgets the way they're going to get hit, it's going to be difficult to come up with the match if you are already utilizing ERate, but there are ways to overcome that as well as far as the match. Work with your partners to gain leasing options so you can amortize the payment over 5 years. So let's say that you need $100,000 worth of stuff and you're a 60% discount district. That means that you have to come up with a $40,000 match. You can certainly lease that over time, and working with your partners, only have to pay that over a 5-year period. And there's a variety of ways to attack that. One of the good ways to do that is with what's called managed internal broadband services. Again, you do not have to have ownership of the gear. You can amortize it over up to 5 years and have your service provider, STEP in this instance, supply that gear to you and amortize it over the 5-year period at the same time they're supporting it for you. Next slide. As of yesterday, the House of Representatives announced the HEROES Act, COVID-19 Stimulus 4.0. In it, there is $90 billion for education. 65% of that is designated for K-12 LEAs, and it includes support online learning by purchasing educational technology and internet access for students, assistive technology or adaptive equipment that aids in regular and substantive educational interactions between students and their classroom instructor, distance learning. So bottom line is that that's the kind of the description of what they're doing, and it gives into much more detail after that. Extensive definitions for distance learning are on page 1358 of this document. It makes for good bedtime reading if you need to fall asleep. But bottom line is there's a tremendous amount of money, and if you have any political connections whatsoever, please let it bubble up. We really need this money. The educational agencies are going to get killed in their budgets if this doesn't go through. The handwriting's already on the wall. So please follow up with as you can. Next slide. One of the things that's allowed now that has always been a controversial thing as far as E-rate's concerned are demonstrations or proof of concepts, bake-offs, whatever you want to call them. Outside of E-rate 470 filings, so once you file your Form 470, the rules get really strict. You can only have a demonstration device or license or whatever it is for 15 days during your 470 window. Outside of that, there's a lot more flexibility. Make sure that you don't keep it for 6 months and then say, oh, by the way, here it is back, or a year later give it back to your partner or service provider. But you certainly are eligible to do so for a period of time that's where you can actually do a real evaluation. 15 days doesn't seem like it's long enough, frankly, but make sure you track the product delivery and get an RMA with a return receipt, and make sure you document the return of that gear or that license, whatever it is, and then you should be safe. So now we're going to kind of talk about E-rate directly. And so this is more of a prep for a little bit of cleanup for this last 2020 funding year and prep for 2021. Next. So are you filing for the correct thing? This has been a challenge with the introduction of basic maintenance of internal connections, which has been around for quite a while, but then managed internal broadband services and the definitions for each one of them. So internal connections is the purchase and acquisition of product licenses and installation. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to get the stuff, you've contracted for it, your service provider partner delivers it, and you bill USAC for the balance either through this service provider or billed entity application for reimbursement process. Again, fairly straightforward. Basic maintenance of internal connections. This is the manufacturer's support and a projected break fix on a time and materials basis. So as a problem occurs and it's repaired by the service provider, that would be invoiced. It does not include licenses, and it does not include what are, a subscription service. So a blanket coverage warranty that says if anything breaks, we come out and fix it free of charge. That's not eligible under basic maintenance of internal connections or under ERate, period. And then the last thing is managed internal broadband services. It does not include items covered under basic maintenance of internal connections. So break, fix, and support are not covered under managed internal broadband services. The definition of managed internal broadband services is operation, management, and monitoring of eligible services. So if you're filing for licenses under basic maintenance of internal connections, it will eventually get flagged. It may not even happen until you go to get reimbursed for it, and then it gets caught when they look at the actual invoice and see, oh, that includes a license that's not eligible under basic maintenance, and then either you or your partner service provider are caught holding the bag and having to pay for it completely out of pocket. Next slide. So I've put together this matrix, and it's not by way of trying to confuse you, but to try and get to where everybody is on the same page and moving forward. It's really critical that when you apply for internal connections, you apply for all three things. Internal connections if you intend to buy the equipment or service, basic maintenance of internal connections for the support of that as far as online break, fix, support kinds of stuff, and then managed internal broadband services if you have want your partner service provider to monitor it, manage it, or operate it for you. And again, so it's critical that in your Form 470 that you ask for all three things, and that will really cover your bases. So under basic maintenance of internal connections, you cannot acquire hardware, software, or licenses. You can maintain things, go and, blow the fans out, actually physical maintenance, or maintaining it as far as updating the software with a bug fix or whatever that may be. You can also have under basic maintenance of internal connections what's called break fix. If something breaks, a technician can be dispatched to replace that access point, for instance, if it's completely failed. The kicker on that is that what you do is you take the entire year's potential break fix situations and say, I estimate my break fix is going to require 100 hours of on-site technician working to repair and replace something. And then as it occurs, you would get a trouble ticket and a repair invoice and then submit that to USAC for reimbursement. So it's a time and materials type of situation estimated on the total amount of time required to do the repairs over the course of the next year. And again, reconfiguration is eligible under internal connections basic maintenance as well. So internal connections, obviously hardware and software acquisition, the license for this equipment or service, and then that's basically it. Manufacturer support not including break fix is eligible as a part of the license, but not as a separate line item. That's note 3. And again, the rest of that stuff for a new configuration, if for a new installation, is eligible under internal connections. And then last is managed internal broadband services. You can lease or rent or acquire an initial piece of equipment under managed internal broadband services, and you can buy the software for that as well as the licensing. And then not including break fix is not eligible under manufacturer support unless it's part of the license for managed internal broadband services. Monitoring and then new configurations, again, under managed internal broadband services. Operation and management, which are kind of ambiguous, kind of definitions, if you will, but the operation and management are eligible under managed internal broadband services, and again, monitoring as well. I know it's confusing, and no offense against the USAC or the FCC, but this is what happens when lawyers get in and try and define things that are operational as far as we know intuitively as IT folks. Next slide. As you move forward in future years, make sure that you have a signed contract with terms and conditions, and make sure that those terms and conditions are conducive to ERate. No offense against the consultant community, but oftentimes consultants put in there ERate are subject to ERate funding. Well, if that's the only legal term and condition regarding your ERate process in the terms and conditions, what happens if you don't get funded? Or what happens if you want to begin the implementation process before you see a funding commitment decision letter, and that would be a billed entity application for reimbursement or BEAR process, and not having the service provider do the invoicing. All kinds of situations can arise where just very simple ERate terms and conditions need to be a little bit more elaborate. Make sure it is for 3 years plus 2 voluntary annual extensions. That way you don't have to go through the pain of filing a new Form 470 every year and go through an acquisition or bid process every year. You can lock in one service provider partner and retain them and utilize them again and again off of that same contract. So I'm basically establishing a master contract agreement. And ensure it has progress payments and based on percentage of completion or delivery and installation. That kind of a clause in there is important to have so that you can have flexibility in your process. And then make sure you have a force majeure clause to cover tariffs. Or that can be listed as a contingency clause as well. As far as cleanup goes for funding year 2020, make sure you follow up on your receipt acknowledgement letter. This is your best chance to correct any kind of clerical errors and clean up the process. Make sure that your item 21 or your FRN line items match up with the bill of materials that was actually provided as part of your terms or as part of your original ERate contract. Make sure that those are a match. Make sure that you have the correct thing under the correct category in internal connections versus basic maintenance versus managed internal broadband services. And then again, make sure you file your receipt of service confirmation form, your Form 486, so that you can begin the implementation and invoicing process. Next, please. So planning for the future. So, make sure your 2020 documentation is organized and all filed away nice, neat, and tidy. If you go onto the USAC website, there is actually a list of documentations and tabs for preparation for retaining that documentation. There is a 10-year document retention law as far as ERate process concerned. Start planning for your installs while your campuses are empty. Obviously, this is a really good time to be doing your summertime stuff and all that sort of thing. It's kind of recuperating from last year's process. And then begin your needs assessment and budgeting process for next year. As much as you hate to, as painful as it sounds, ERate is just around the corner again, and you're going to need to be filing the Form 470 for 2021. The good news is, as far as 2021, it's going to be a much simpler application process. You don't have to worry about individual site budgets. They're trying to get non-instructional facilities. This is another one that you'll see if you go into those filings, but they're trying to get the non-instructional facilities not require cost allocation among all sites, in other words, included as part of the process. So if you're trying to distribute your wide area network through a switch and a router device at your district office, which is also your data center, that is problematic and requires a cost allocation among the sites. Today, they're trying to alleviate that rule as well to simplify this whole process. So again, make sure you're planning for 2021. you can file your Form 470 for 2021 as early as July 1st, so it's just around the corner. And next slide, which is blank. I'm going to open it up for questions here. We're here to answer them at your discretion. We're here to help as much as we can legally. We appreciate your opportunity to talk to you this morning and look forward to working with you in the future.
Hey, Jim, looks like the first couple questions are coming to you. First question is,
Okay.
do you think you can use Kerrs to replace lost devices not returned that you distributed that you already had?
CARES Act funding is really broad, and I would say yes.
All right, and then the next question for you again is, for clarity, does the MIBS category apply to all server configurations or just caching servers?
It's for an eligible server. So if, for instance, caching would be one. If your firewall resides on a server or server platform, any eligible service that it resides on a server, your wireless controllers is another example, would all be examples of servers that are eligible to be supported under Managed Internal Broadband Services.
All right, and then there's another question. It's, is there any talk about FCC getting some of the spectrum originally given to school districts back from the carriers, Verizon, etc., so that the schools can use that for the distance learning or negotiate with carriers? We have a spectrum locked up by a carrier. It is not being used, and it is locked up until 2035 for this person.
There was discussion, and I'm not sure which spectrum you're referring to specifically, but there was some spectrum allocation discussion as recently as like a couple of weeks ago that looked like it was going to get freed up. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but it's hopeful.
All right, and that's the questions we have. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to write them into the question and answer box, and we'll wait around for a few minutes for them.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for your time this morning and for the questions. Oh, we had a question just come in. Said I joined the meeting late, so I don't know if this was said already. Can we get the slideshow emailed to us? So we certainly can make that available. And actually, Teresa, we can do one better. The meeting has been recorded, and so shortly we will be sending out a link so that you can watch the meeting in its entirety. Well, I thank everybody for their time today. Any other questions, please feel free to have those conversations directly with us. There's a number of us on the team, and we're happy and excited to work together. So thanks, and everyone have a great Wednesday.